Hello, everybody. My name is Corey Rosen, and you're listening to the Story Podcast. And welcome to the 250th episode with Mr. John Yamrus. John had a career spanning more than 50 years as a working writer. John has published 39 books, has also had more than 3,500, that's 3,500 poems, published in magazines and anthologies around the world. A number of his books and poems are taught in college and university courses. He is widely considered to be a master of minimalism and the neo-noir in modern poetry. His two most recent books are the memoir The Street, which we have here today, and a volume of poetry called People and Other Bad Ideas, which we also have today. Several of his books have also appeared in translation across many languages. Welcome to the show, Mr. John.
Well, thank you, Corey. I'm really excited to be talking to you.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited. It's been a while since I've had a writer on the show, and I like to have an eclectic amount of people on the show. So I'm really, really excited to get into, especially such an established writer. I've never had such an established writer on the show.
Well, established kind of translates to old, so, but I guess I'll take established.
Well, you are a well-accomplished writer.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. That way, for
Thank
sure.
you. Yeah, I've been doing it for a long time.
So, where would you say that your love for writing began?
Love for writing began. I'm sure, like most people who come into a career of some sorts, my love for doing this started in high school. And
English 101 classes.
English 101, and knowing that in school they never taught what I wanted to read, what I was into, so
Really?
I started reading a lot of things on my own.
Well, I assume that the curriculum back then must have been, it had to have been wildly different from what I experienced even.
I don't know. In high school, it was a lot of Dickens and things like that.
We never were prescribed Dickens. We were prescribed stuff like The Kite Runner or The Color Purple.
Oh,
or The
well,
Book
then
Thief,
that's totally different. Yeah, I love The Color Purple, but Dickens, like in high school, I hated Dickens.
Really?
Now reading Dickens as a an adult on the far side of adulthood, I really do enjoy Dickens, and as I've grown older, I've really liked coming back to those authors that maybe I didn't give the proper attention to when I was a kid. Dickens is a fine example, or Thackeray and those kind of people.
So, what was it? What was the first book that you picked up and was like, "Wow, this is something. This is something I really want to."
I think for a lot of people of my generation who wanted to be writers, Jack Kerouac was big, and his book On the Road just it opened my head up and taught me that literature doesn't have to be literature with air quotes. It can be something that belongs to the streets. It was rock and roll music to my literary ear.
So explain it for a little bit. I'm not familiar with that author.
You're not familiar with Jack Kerouac? Wow.
It rings a bell. My grandmother taught literature for a while, so I'm sure that name has popped up in my head. But
Kerouac was big in the late 50s. His biggest book was called On the Road, and back in his time, literature was very. It was literature, literature in quotes, and Kerouac freed the lines. He made it that you could. I guess the best example is he equated literature, his type of literature, to jazz music.
Gotcha.
It was very improvisational, very free form, off the cuff, on the fly, and he just knocked down all the walls and just made it open and free. So if you ever get a chance, look up Jack Kerouac and read some of his books.
Absolutely. So is that where you started writing yourself, or is there a little bit of a...
How I started writing myself was, like any young guy. It was my way to meet girls. You know,
Right.
I wasn't a football player. I wasn't a basketball player. So my way to get attention with girls was to be a writer.
And that work?
Yeah. I've been married for 48 years. So
There you go.
it worked.
There you go. So, what was the earliest inspirations for your writing? Besides girls, what would you like write about?
Well, Kerouac taught me to write about what you're doing, what you're seeing, what you're feeling, and
so like journaling
almost like journaling on the fly. Yeah, and my entire career, if you want to call it that, was just writing down. I never wanted to write the big poem. You know,
Right.
I never wanted to
be the Edgar Allan Poe or the Emily
Dickinson.
Yeah.
You know, I never, I always hated those poems, you know, love is, or hate is, or war, or peace. I just wanted to write about that hair growing on the tip of my nose. I wanted to write about the everyday things that happened to me. I wanted to write about my dog taking a dump out in the backyard.
So almost like where the sidewalk ends.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So, you know, I wanted to make it real and immediate, and I won't call it throwaway, but
like abstract almost.
Abstract, again, like jazz. I wanted my writing to be in the moment.
That's also, I remember growing up, my mother had that book, Where the Sidewalk Ends, and just used to read it to me all the time. And I bought it for my girlfriend, because she's never experienced that kind of like off the wall literature. She's like, what the hell does this mean? It's like, it doesn't have to mean anything.
It doesn't have to mean
it's just a silly poem.
You're talking about literature, talking about music. You're a musician.
Yes.
You're a music background. Have you ever heard Captain Beefheart?
The name rings a bell, but I don't think I've ever listened to him.
You have to get his Trout Mask Replica album. Talk about opening up your mind to new experiences and new sound. Beefheart was very much part of my what taught me to think and look outside the box. Again, he's somebody you should look up.
I'll have to write that down. It's something I need as a notebook for every single podcast, just to write down all the. You think after 250 episodes, I'd have that by now?
Well, yeah. I mean, before we started recording, we were talking about Chuck Berry, and I was telling you how I'm currently reading this book about when Chuck Berry and all those guys were big. The college kids started getting into the people who kind of kicked off Chuck Berry. So that's when that early blues revival started with people like Muddy Waters and Son House
to listen to all of those.
And Howlin' Wolf and all those great early people who really didn't get much appreciated until it was too late.
Kind of washed over by the time.
Yep.
So you're in a high school. You start writing a little bit. I assume you decided to go to college?
Yeah. We were talking about this the other day. I ended up going one semester to college. My first book came out at that time, and I thought I was going to tear apart the world. Become
a rock star. Yep.
Be a rock star writer, and that never happened. But maybe I'm not a rock star, but I am persistent.
Sure.
Which is why over the course of my career, I've published somewhere around 3,500 pieces. And when I talk to young writers, kids starting out, and they ask, what should I do? And that's what I always tell them. Be consistent. Do whatever you love, whatever you want to do it every single day.
Do it well.
Do it well. I've made that a point to try and write every single day of my life. A good example is Stephen King.
I love Stephen King.
Stephen King writes every day of his life. He's done this since he was in
Really?
college.
I
He
didn't know
writes
that.
every day of his life except his birthday and Christmas Day.
Those are valid
Every
reasons.
day. And if it's paid off for Stephen King, it'll pay off for me and you. So I've always followed that example.
No, I think that's a great because it combats writer's block.
Well, you know, I talk about writer's block because you know, I hear people saying, "Oh, I'm experiencing writer's block." Writer's block is BS, if you ask me, because if you come down and exercise your instrument, whether you're a musician or a writer, if you do it every day, you'll learn that
Learn something.
you'll do something. There
Yep.
is no such thing as writer's block. Writer's block is a term used by people who are too lazy to work through it.
100%. Yeah, no, that's something I recommend for musicians as well. Is just sit down and write something every single day. It doesn't matter if it's good or not.
You can always throw it out.
You can always throw it out.
If you're one of those people who say, "Well, I'm not writing now. I'm waiting for inspiration," again, that's BS. Inspiration comes when you work for it.
Mm-hmm. And not to say that there are those times where you see something, oh my God, I'm inspired by this.
Yeah, yeah.
It happens, but you got to find inspiration in the most mundane thing.
That's that's gravy. What you're talking about? Oh man, I'm inspired. That's the icing on top of the cake.
Yes.
You do the work.
You gotta get the mashed potatoes too.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm having fun talking with you.
Yeah, no, this is great. I'm enjoying this. So you went to college for one semester and decided, nope, can't do it. Why?
Well, like I told you, I thought I was going to tear the world apart. So
Gotcha.
I spent my time, of course, reading and writing. But I did my time as, I was a really bad salesman. I worked in shoe factories. But whatever I did, I wrote about the people I encountered, the people. You get out and do things, and I found that was as good as any college for me. And
Oh yeah, especially in something like the liberal arts, right? I mean, it's one thing to like go to a college and like hone in your craft and yada yada and whatever else, right? But something like, for example, music. It is good to go and learn your music theory and learn all the literary devices maybe
Yep,
or whatever
yep.
else and really hone in those skills. But it's another completely valid course to also just do it.
Get out and do it.
And
You're talking about learning your skills, and there's a fine line. You can't break the rules until you know what the rules are.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's another thing. I struggle with sometimes I struggle with the option that I went to college, but also I could be doing the same thing I did there. While I value my time at the college, I made so many connections, and it got me into Lancaster. I'm not originally from Lancaster. I'm originally from Salisbury, Maryland.
Oh, okay.
So and this was quite a hike for me. 3 hours, even though my you know what's something funny? My grandmother was giving me grief that I went 3 hours away from home. And then I was like, Grammy, didn't you in the 60s go 6 hours away from home?
But that was different then. That was different then.
Yeah, it was different. You didn't have telephones back then. What are you talking? You had to write a telegram to say that you're okay. Let me go 3 hours away.
Okay, so what kind of music do you listen to?
It varies. I'm a big giant fan of Elton John and Queen and that kind of era. Very classical. I also have a really high opinions of classical music artists like Mozart, Mendelssohn, and Beethoven and Bach. It really ranges all over the place. I could be listening to barbershop quartet. I could be listening to rap. I could be listening to some hardcore heavy metal music. It really depends on the day and whatever. I don't like to put myself in a box.
Well, you're talking about Mozart and Mendelssohn and Bach and those guys. Right after World War II, all the jazz musicians started going, because a lot of them were veterans.
Yes.
They started going to school on the what do you call it?
Music theory and
Yeah, and they started going to school in New York. Because their college was paid for by the GI Bill, so they started learning music theory. So guys like Miles Davis and Gil Evans, all those people were getting into Bach and Mozart, and the jazz musicians really knew their
stuff.
They
it's incredible because I like to call there's different levels of jazz,
Mm-hmm.
right? You got the standard jazz, which are like your standards, and that's like level 1.
Mm-hmm.
Then you get into stuff like, modulations and other stuff like that. That's like level 2. And then you move on and forward until you get into like tritone substitutions, and then all of these, a bunch of baloney, quite frankly, that doesn't make sense. And that's like level 7 jazz, where you have no clue what the heck is going on, but it sounds great.
I don't know what level you would put John Coltrane.
John Coltrane is like level 3 or 4.
Level 3 or 4.
He's pretty advanced, but he doesn't go wild with it. He's still reined in.
There is a new player. She's an alto sax player named Lakeisha Benjamin. And you might want to check her out, too. She's really, really good. And she was heavily influenced also, not only by Coltrane, but by Alice Coltrane, who was John's wife.
Right.
And she's put out a bunch of good... Lakeisha Benjamin, you might want to check her out.
Yeah, absolutely. So you end off college, you're at your like mid-20s at this point, and you're still writing.
Mm-hmm.
What are you writing about? What is your... Are you heading towards a magnum opus at this point? Where do you think you are with that?
Yeah, I don't think I ever had an intention or a vision for a Okay, the thing that I always wanted to do, if we're going to use the word magnum opus, the thing I always wanted to be the focus of my career, if you want to call it that, is longevity.
Right.
Okay, I wrote a one-word poem that caught a lot of flack for being a one-word poem, because there were articles written about it where people would say, you can't have a one-word poem, and other people that argued on the other side of the thing, but that one-word poem was the word endure, and that kind of sums up everything about my writing. It's like we talked about, doing it every day, about my 3,500 published poems. It's about enduring and being consistent. And if anything that I wanted for people to get from my writing, it's that I have endured. And, I'm 73 now, and I like the fact that I got a new book coming out in a couple of weeks. And as a matter of fact, you had a couple of weeks ago as a guest, Tim Quiet from the band Super Genius. And those guys were cool enough and kind enough and crazy enough to ask me to do a short reading at their album release party and to introduce the band. And I ended up writing a little bit about that night. So... if I can I read the poem that's going to be in my next book?
Yes,
it's about that night with Super Genius. It's called A Rock Band. A rock band had asked me to be their opening act for a concert after the release of their latest album. It was a double album, and it was good, and so were the band. They're not young anymore, but neither am I, so I said, yeah, I'd do it. And it was the first time in decades that my wife came to a reading of mine, mostly because it technically wasn't my show, and the place was also a restaurant, so we could eat. And anyway, she sat there in the dark at the back of the room, but I could still see her there smiling. And for some reason, I didn't get nervous. The band was already up, and I did 15 or 20 minutes, and I was good. And people laughed and smiled and clapped. And for the first time in a long time, I left the reading with a good feeling, a full stomach, and an amazing woman who, for some unknown reasons, still loves only me.
There you go. That is very much that. See, have you been criticized that isn't really poetry?
Oh, bingo. You hit the nail on the head all the time. People just say that's prose laid out like poetry.
Yeah.
And, you know, I guess everybody in every generation gets criticized by the people who came before them as that's not the way we used to do it. And, you know, and there are people who all criticize because that's not the way I did it. But this is my poetry.
So how does that fit? Because from what you just told me, it sounded like you were just telling me an experience uh without any rhyme or reason, just like you said, prose. Why does that fall into the category of poetry to you?
I don't think it really matters why it falls as poetry to me. I think as long as it resonates with the reader. Let me read something else that's going to be in
Sure.
the new book. Maybe this will be an example, maybe not, but I'm going to read it. It's called My Friend Ted. My friend Ted always wanted to write. He said he knew he had a book in him. Of course, everybody does, but Ted really did. The problem was Ted loved to talk. He was a better talker than a writer, and when he talked, people listened. And when he paused, they held their breath. Ted used to call me and talk about the book he wanted to write, about what it was like for him growing up during the war. It was World War II, and Ted had some stories. Good ones, interesting ones. The problem was, except for some notes, he never really wrote them down. And the only one left to tell you that is me.
That rings more true to poetry to me, because you had that the I really like poetry. So you had the
I won't hold that against you.
no, it's fine, it's fine. Oh, because my grandmother, bless her heart, like I said, she used to teach literature for 50 or so years at the college level. So she would always check my papers or whatever else just to make sure that I was doing what I was supposed to, right? And then she'd always kick me in the butt if I ever said did anything wrong. You know what I mean? But no, I like that one a lot more because it has the it starts off some of the sentences end with the starting project. You know, he likes to talk. He talked about this, da 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 da, and it has a certain rhythm to it, especially when you speak it. Too.
Well, when I was first starting out, I used to really be more at the front of my brain, more conscious about the rhythm, and when I'd be writing, I'd find myself tapping my foot and getting that rhythm. And back in those days, I had an old Smith Corona portable typewriter, little blue thing, and you know I'd get whacking away at that, and my foot would be tapping, and it was almost like a kind of music to me. Exactly.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, and now I understand what you mean by poetry that touches people, because that was a really good. They're almost like short stories. Yeah.
Well, you know, short. I look on the poems as, imagine you're sitting in a speeding train.
Sure.
Train's a good example. You're looking out the window, and you see all this stuff flashing by you. All blurry. And you look out, and you got that immediate snapshot of what you see, and in the back of your head, you know there's a whole lot going on outside of what you can see, and that was the difficult part for me, getting the reader to to imagine what's outside what I was describing. So that's where you start to dance a tightrope as a writer. saying what you wanted to say, but being able to lead the reader
To
to
think outside the box.
think outside the
Yeah.
box.
Yeah, that's something I got criticized for because I'm not very good at thinking outside the box. I'm very blunt and pragmatic, shall we say.
Mm-hmm.
One of my friends, Roddy Turnstone, wrote a song about Toxic Harbor, about the Baltimore Harbor. And I was like, okay, nothing much outside of this besides him just talking about the Boston Harbor and how it's been polluted.
Uh-huh.
But he was like, "No, there's so much more to this. You gotta see it. You gotta read between the lines." And I'm like,
Reading between the lines. I talk about how I always hope for my poetry to be read, understood, or appreciated on two levels. You got the immediate thing, like what you get as soon as you read it, or
right,
as soon as you hear me. But later on, when you're upstairs sitting on the toilet, you'll go, "Oh, that's what he meant."
right.
That's what I'm doing. So I want them to work on two levels.
Yeah, I understand that. I feel like some artists lead the person in the direction of that better than others.
Uh-huh.
For like example, the Eagles in Hotel California.
Mm-hmm.
That's very clear. It's
Mm-hmm.
talking about drugs.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's not talking about the stupid hotel that people can't leave. It's talking about an addiction because it's kind of on the nose, I would say. But there's other artists like Bohemian Rhapsody, for example,
Mm-hmm.
made by Queen. I didn't know what that he was talking about for the longest time. I just thought it was just his magnum opus, as it were,
Uh-huh.
right? But now there's like a really deep story about how he's selling his soul to the devil, and I could go more into it, but you know what I mean? It's more, there is a deeper story behind it of how Freddie Mercury is telling how he wanted to sell his soul to the devil for the music that he was making. And then, his mother saying, "No, don't let him go." Or, "Mama, I just killed a man. He just killed himself for this deal," right? And stuff like that.
I never knew that. And it's such a good, on that immediate level, such a good song.
It's such a good song. You wouldn't need to think deeper about it until one day you do, and it's like, oh my God.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Oh man, there's so much good stuff out there. It's a wonder I even get to leave my house because there's so much good stuff to read or listen to, or and then you get out and you want to be part of the world.
So you mentioned that, over 39 books, ranging from what topics? Can I ask you that?
Okay. When I was starting out, I wanted to be a novelist. Again, that goes back to Jack Kerouac. Every writer wants to be a novelist, and I wanted to be the next Jack Kerouac. And I did publish two really crappy novels. And the only thing those novels ever taught me was that I'm not a novelist.
Well, there you go.
It taught me that I'm a sprinter, not a long distance runner. Let me read one from one of my earlier books. The book is called Selected Poems, The Director's Cut. And there's a really neat... Well, there's a really neat story behind that. This came out in 2022. The publisher wanted to do a retrospective of my work. And his printing format allowed him 550 pages. And I said, holy God, nobody's going to want to buy 550 pages of poetry, especially my poetry. And we fought about it literally for 2 months. And I got him to cut the book down to 384 pages. And he published the book, and it sold very well. And he said, "John, this sold well. We gotta restore the book to the way I wanted to do it," meaning him.
Right.
And again, we fought. I said, "You're even crazier than I thought you were, because we already sold as many books as we're gonna sell. You're gonna do a 550-page book of something you already published 384 pages." And we fought, and I said, "Well, it's your money. You're crazy. You want to throw it away. So he brought out a 542-page expanded director's cut. And to both of our surprise, it hit #1 on Amazon in poetry.
Wow.
And so I was really proud of that. It was only #1 for a minute and a half, but
Right.
I made sure I took a screenshot of it before it disappeared. But here's, let me see. Okay. I'm going to read you 2.
Sure.
You know, now that you got me here, I'm going to make you suffer and,
I know, it's fine. I like
and
suffering.
pay the price for having me here.
I asked for it.
After working in the yard this morning, my hands smell like tomatoes. They smell like grass. They smell like dirt and weeds. They smell like an old rubber garden hose. They smell like mulch and sweat and gasoline. They smell like my father and his father and his. And I'll read you one more.
I like that one. That's a good one.
You talk about, memories. And again, my poems are just talking about memories and committing them to paper. You know, same thing like Muddy Waters will write a song about something that happened to him, and
Right.
if it turns into art, that's good, but at least you're doing the deed. Anyway, here's a poem called When I Was a Kid. When I was a kid, I worked in a shoe factory. I was a healer, putting heels on women's shoes. I'd glue the heels to the soles and put them on a conveyor that took them to a trimmer who sanded the excess. If I didn't do it well enough or fast enough, he'd turn around and throw a shoe at me. Pretty soon it got to be our routine. I'd glue and duck and glue and duck and glue and duck. I was quick and young, and he rarely ever hit me. Eventually the work ran out and I moved on. I often wondered what drives a man to act like that. After all, we were piece workers. We got paid by the shoe. It cost him money to throw at me. Anyway, that was a long, long time ago, and I'm sure he's dead by now. Leo. His name was Leo. That's all I got.
There you go. That people can buy that on Amazon.
Yeah, they could get all of my books that are still in print on Amazon.
I might do that.
Go to Amazon, just look up my name, or go to Amazon under books and look up my name. And that's selected poems, the director's cut. The new books are called The Street or People and Other Bad Ideas.
Let's get to talking about them. Let's talk about The Street. We have The Street here with us. Tell me about this. This is a memoir on your life.
Yeah. Again, there's a story behind this one. The Street was published originally as 2 slim books.
Mm-hmm.
RMA. You're a young guy. When you'd get yearbooks, guys would sign yearbooks and write RMA. What did RMA stand for?
I actually never have had that.
Okay, RMA was short for Remember Me Always,
Oh, okay.
Remember those times in chemistry class, and then you'd sign it RMA Todd or Bill or whatever. And the other one, there were 2 parts to The Street. And right after COVID hit, the publisher went out of business, and those 2 books went out of print. And when we were nearing the end of COVID, I got an offer from a publisher to put the 2 books together as 1 volume, which is how I always intended it.
Yeah.
And it's called The Street. And what it is a look at the street that I grew up on back in the late 50s, and the people on that street. And I think for anyone of a certain age, it'll bring back some golden, maybe sepia tone memories, but it'll bring back some memories.
Sepia tone, that's a $5 word.
A $5 word from a $2 writer. And the other new book is called People and Other Bad Ideas. And how this book came about, my then publisher, Meat for Tea Press, and meat is spelled MEAT, meat for tea. And I did a podcast with them, and I was reading some new stuff, and all the new things were portraits of people. And she said, the publisher said, your new book should be called People. And I didn't want to just call it People the same way I didn't want to call poems Life or Love or Hate or Death.
People magazine.
Yeah, so I called it People and Other Bad Ideas. And on the cover, they've got, if you look close, if you get the book and look close, there's an Albanian language edition of one of my books sitting on a table. My publisher in Romania was sitting in a restaurant, a bar in Romania, and he was sitting there with a photographer friend of his, and they were shocked. I was going to say surprised, but they were shocked to see a lady sitting at the next table with my book sitting on their table. So he made sure to get a picture of that and send it to me. So we used that for the cover of my book, People and Other Bad Ideas.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What was the first time that you found out that professors were using your stuff in colleges, and how'd that feel?
My wife always, every time I get, some college professor or somebody will ask, for permission to put my stuff in a textbook or teach it in a class. My wife will always say, "Why?" What are they
those
doing?
Close to you that hate you the most, isn't it?
It's true. Maybe they're using them as examples of what not to do, but hey, at least they're taught in schools, and
there's your longevity.
It's again my longevity. You hang around long enough, and people are going to start cluing into your side of the street. So. I've just been around long enough, and you with your music, you stick to it, and you'll hang around long enough, and pretty soon you'll be on this side of the table.
Right. Yeah. Right. So, as you've gotten older, you've done more and more and more. Is there something that you have not done yet that you wish to do?
More and more. That's all I wish to do, is just keep on doing it. I never wanted to sit back and rest and be content. I was talking to my friend. I have a friend who writes. Guy's name is Maxim Furyk. You have to look him up. Furek.
What a cool name.
That's the coolest name.
Coolest name ever.
Cool name for a cool guy, Maxim Furyk. And he started out as a rock and roll journalist.
What a name for a rock and roll journalist.
It's perfect. He published back in the Wilkes-Barre area. He published a magazine about rock and roll, and then he wrote a book about. Now this is before your time. There was a song called Timothy by a group called the Boys, and the Timothy the song was about guys trapped in a mine who cannibalized one of the three people that they were trapped with. And it was based on a true story that happened in Shepton, Pennsylvania. Now, Max wrote a book
I heard that story.
About the rock band. He wrote a book about Shepton, and the whole story involves space aliens. It involves the Catholic Church all the way up to the Pope.
Why not?
And then now Max has some new books coming out on Bigfoot, and again he's a prime example of someone who stays interested, stays interesting, and stays curious. I never understood those people. I'm 73 now, and I never understood those people who once they retire, they
quit.
They quit. They think their life is over.
They
They're
quit
done.
being human.
Exactly. I always look forward to getting up and seeing what's the next thing. You we talk about food, trying new foods, and I can't try that. I'm not gonna like it. The worst that happens is you're not gonna like something. Same way
Well,
with
you
books
can.
and music and literature. The worst that happens, you're not gonna like it. But jump in the water and try it and see if you can swim.
Might have a bad bathroom night.
Yeah.
Well, no, I'm always open for trying new stuff, but there's a point where it's like, oh, that's a Carolina Reaper? I don't think so. Maybe I'll pass on that.
But you don't know it till you try
You don't
it.
know until you try it.
Right.
I don't know if I have the gumption
Uh-huh.
to try it.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen the videos, and I think that's enough.
What's oh, you have to look up videos. There's a Swedish, it's fermented fish called surströmming.
Interesting.
And the cans come, you actually can't take it on planes. It's banned to be taking these cans on plane because if the can opens, it smells
It smells so bad.
so bad
Yeah.
that and you'll find tons of videos on YouTube of people eating and eat. In your audience, look up people eating surströmming, surstroming, or something like that, and you'll see people losing their lunch.
Yeah. No thanks. I'm good. It can be for the people over there. Be for the Nordic people.
There you go.
So, over your career, what are some of some mistakes that maybe you think you have made or you've seen other writers make, and how can we curb that for the future generations?
Well, we talked about mistake waiting for inspiration. When I write, I always try to write without a plan.
Okay, so you freeform write.
Freeform,
Right.
growing up with jazz music as part of my insides, I've learned don't follow the roadmap, follow where it's going to take you, and I like to start and see what happens. Miles Davis, you probably, being a musician, you probably heard this story that he once famously fired someone because he caught him rehearsing. He said, "I pay you to rehearse on stage, not in the studio."
Yeah, I have heard that. I admire that to a point sometimes. Well, I guess Miles Davis, his whole point was improv.
Yeah, and if you got to the point where you were playing in Miles Davis's band, you were pretty good already.
Yeah, I was gonna say you probably hit the mark already.
You knew your stuff.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I guess you're right. So, and also, I like stream of conscious writing, especially when you are like feeling anxious or feeling any sort of way negatively. Right, you're gonna get a lot of stuff out of you that you would never, that hasn't come up to your actual conscience yet. You're just it's a really great way of journaling.
Yeah. Again, there's a fine line.
Right, yes.
Whether it's, you got to balance that, whether you're writing for you or whether you're writing for the audience.
Yeah.
And either way can, too far in either direction can be a mistake. If you're writing, playing music just to please your audience, you're not gonna really extend yourself.
No.
If you're a band going out just playing the same hits over and over, you're not gonna come up with any new stuff. So you gotta stretch yourself.
Yeah, and there's always going to be an audience for one part of your work, and then an audience for another part of your work.
Yep.
And sometimes those audiences don't meld together, and that's okay.
That's okay. Yep.
And I always tell people, write music. You don't have to write it for yourself, but don't try to write it for anybody else either.
Do you write music for you? You do film work. Do you write music? Do you have the music first, or do you watch the film and let it talk to you?
You have to. I will die on this hill. You have to watch the film first because you gotta get the whole piece. I mean, you can read the script and you can kind of get it, but even the script doesn't tell you the whole story, right? And you got to think about the music as part of this story. You have to write music that serves this story well, or because if you write a jazz piece during a part where someone dies, like an upbeat jazz part, doesn't make sense.
Okay, this is interesting. And I've been harping on Miles Davis, but I'm going to for this story. He put out an album. He was assigned to do the film score in France for an. I can't do the French, so I'll do it in English. The title of the movie was Ascension to the Scaffold, and they asked him to do the score, and he brought his guys in, and it was pretty much just him and a bass player who did this. They played the movie, and he improved as the thing was going on, and you have to get that album. It was incredible. He was totally in tune with what was going on with the screen, and it was one of the best movie scores you're ever gonna hear.
That's typically what I'll do. I'll watch the movie once and then I'll go through and play what I'm feeling as I'm watching it again.
Yeah.
And so that's I think that is the way to. I mean, there are certain other ways. Like John Williams is a great
the guy's
you know I mean?
off the charts
and
good.
Hans Zimmer too. And often what I've seen of their process is that they'll start working on motifs and stuff beforehand, right? And I understand that. I get that. I do really admire that stuff too. But only when movies call for that, right? You know, Star Wars or Schindler's List or whatever, stuff like that calls for like motifs and stuff to arise, or like the Book Thief that he did the score to. They call for motifs, but certain films just call for, you know, free form, on the spot improv, and just to really make you feel something. And so that's the way I do it. And I when I write other music for, you know, the songs that I write, I have a specific intention and a specific idea that I want to get across. Like for example, I'm writing this song called Home, and it's about imposter syndrome. Are you familiar with imposter syndrome? So I during college I went to Lancaster Bible College, and there was this wealth of talent. A lot of people from LBC go to Broadway and Sight and Sound, which are like some of the top stages in this country, right? And I was looking at them and I'm like, oh my God, I do not deserve to be here.
Why am I here?
And, well, it got worse because I started roommating with this dude named Matt Cross, one of my best friends, by the way. He was an excellent drummer, fantastic, uncomparable to me. And here I was on the xylophone playing Mary Had a Little Lamb, you know what I mean? Comparatively, right?
Yeah.
And it took me a while to get over that until I saw my friend Zach Fernbeck. He's currently in Sight and Sound right now. I saw him at the Christmas concert looking in a mirror and performing to himself and just getting angry with himself and discouraged.
Wow.
And I was like,
wow.
You know, that meant something to me.
Yeah, because if he could kick himself in the ass, you...
Right, I could. Well, and he had the solo, and he was getting all nervous about it. I'm like, wow, I view him as like above me, and he's still struggling with these issues too. So that's really what brought me out of that. It's like, okay, I deserve to be here too. And not only that, but a Grammy Award winning Doris Hoglotti called my music something similar to Hans Zimmer, and so I
wow.
So I got a little bit of boost from that.
Wow.
Great friend of hers. She's like one of the top 4 clarinetists in the world. And she lives right here in Lancaster.
Wow.
Yeah, you would be amazed about how many people live here in Lancaster. But the point of the home is that I want people to feel that feeling of feeling alone and just wanting to go back home. You know, having that homesickness. And so it kind of starts out with a lone piano, and then it kind of gradually builds up into this choir piece where it's all big and there's all sorts, there's an orchestra, there's a whole choir singing along too.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Quite like a gospel song, if you will.
And that requires thought and planning.
And
You
it
you can't
requires
just
thoughts and
wing it.
planning.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
So there's room for both ways
For
of going
sure.
about it,
For sure.
and rightfully so. There's never one way to write anything.
Mm-hmm.
Whether there's not one way to paint, so there's not one way to do anything. There's only the way that you like to do it.
I just finished here talking about painting now. I could talk to you all day. This is fun. We're talking about painting. I just read a book about the search for Vivienne Moreau. She was. Are you familiar with Manet's Olympia?
No.
Look it up. Edouard Manet's Olympia.
Is that a person, place, or thing?
The Olympia was. It's a.
I know the city in Greece, and that's about it.
A painting of a naked. I guess she was a prostitute, and it caused quite a stir back in France in I think it was 1888, and Olympia. The model was a young lady, 17 or 18 at the time, named Vivienne Moreau. And there's a book about the search for her because she went on to become a painter in her own right. And it's just interesting. I don't know how I got talking about Manet and Olympia, but look up that painting. It's really interesting.
So we kind of talked a little bit about advice before, but talking about consistency, enduring, and stuff like that. But if anybody were to listen to you and to get one message, not just one word message, but a whole sentence maybe, what would it be?
Not endure, okay. Advice to writers you're talking about?
Yeah. Or advice to any creative.
I run into those writers who say, "Oh, I never read other writers because I don't want to muddy the waters.
You don't want to be influenced by too many things. Or copy or whatever.
I want to punch them in the face because you gotta know what else is out there, what's going on.
I totally agree.
You gotta know what your competition is, if you want to call it that, but you got to know what's going on. You got to know what came before you.
Know the trends and
you got to know the trends. You got to know what it's built on. So you got to know the past.
It's smart. It's smart marketing for yourself. And we're all built on top of we're all standing on top of the shoulders of giants.
Absolutely.
Right? And there's a reason why they're giants.
Yep.
And you have to. I mean, like you said, you have to know the rules to break the rules, and then you can expand.
Yep.
And then you can become the giant that people will stand on top of, right? But you have to know what comes before you, and you have to know what people are doing right now.
Yep, absolutely. You don't see. I mean, Target has to look and see what the other big stores are doing. You gotta do your
market research.
Absolutely, market research. That's perfect example.
Yeah, because I mean, I respect the fact that, like, when I do a movie, I won't go and listen to a bunch of soundtrack scores when I'm actually scoring the piece. But beforehand, I'll look at, like, okay, what does the director want, right? Director wants spaghetti western kind of music. Okay, I will go on Enrico. I forget his whole name, but I'll go look up Clint Eastwood music, right? Just listen to an hour of that. And then when I'm actually scoring the film, I will, I'm sort of influenced by the past, but I'm not going to just go and listen to them again. I'm going to create my own version of what?
Something new. Yep. Yeah. So.
But now at least I'm informed of, like, okay, I know the trends of the spaghetti western. I understand the cowboy and the renegade and the outlaw, and I understand the sounds that go along with that, because it's a very, very, very established genre. You can't just put piano and strings in the classical sense, unless you're trying to, unless you're trying to poke fun at it, right? You know what I mean? You gotta have your, you gotta know where the roots come from.
You know, everything has a basic. You got Hallmark movies. You got the hero and the heroine, and her family's business is going to be put up for sale unless she can find a way to save it. And you got to know the
tropes.
you got to know the tropes before you can break them.
You gotta know the hero's journey before you mess around with it, right?
Yep.
So, and I really do agree with people with you, and I disagree with those people that say I don't want to be influenced by anything. You got to be influenced somewhere, or else you're not going to know what music is.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So,
and again, it all goes back to doing the deed, getting up, doing the work every day, and being consistent. You have to treat your work with respect. You have to be professional about what you're doing. Even if you're not getting paid for it, you got to be professional about it. And turning it to you, you're very professional. I really enjoyed talking with you today because you're a pro at what you did.
Thank you. I hope so after 250 episodes.
And this is it. This is number 250, and I'm proud to be number 250.
Yeah, that's right. You'll be the last name on the next sweatshirt that comes out. So.
Jeez.
Yeah, so we're kind of wrapping it up a little bit. So I'm going to ask you a few more questions that I like to ask all my other guests.
Okay.
And then we'll wrap it up.
Okay.
So I've asked a lot of the questions I like to ask all the guests already, so I have to think. What is something that you're still working on to improve as a writer?
Not to repeat myself, to try to do something new, and to expand the palette. To keep trying something new. That's why, again, that's why I never go into a project with a conceived beginning, middle, and end. I let the story take me where it wants me to take me.
There you go. Where can people find your work?
You could find if you go on to Amazon under books and search my name, John Yamrus, Yamrus. I'll spell it because nobody ever gets it right. It's Yamrus, and you did. And just look for me under books, and the two newest books are People and Other Bad Ideas or The Street. And if you happen to have, parents or grandparents of a certain age, and they want to bring back some memories and maybe pick up on some jazz references and some painting references and some old boxing references, pick up a copy of The Street. They might like it. Or if you have some film influence, pick up a copy of Selected Poems, The Director's Cut.
Do you have anything else coming up that you'd like to advertise?
I have a new book coming out, but that'll be about a month from now, and we'll talk about that if I ever come back on the show.
All right. Well, with all that said, my name is Corey Rosen. This has been the Story Podcast. You can check out all 250 plus episodes on my website, CoreyRosenProductions.com. That's CORYROSEN Productions.com. We've got a lot of stuff going on. Here at the SRCC, which is this lovely venue that we're at currently, please come and check out our open mics on Wednesday, where we do allow poetry readings. So if you want to come out and read some poetry to the masses, you can do that, or just play whatever you want to play. That happens Wednesday, 7 o'clock to 11. We also have a lot of other events, including next week, we're having our TV show. I told you this a little bit about this earlier. We're having our TV show with Tommy B, a wonderful 12-stringing, finger-picking dude out of Carlisle, PA. He always wears suits. Rumor has it that he might be wearing 2 suits at this TV show, so I'm really, really excited. Tickets are on the website if you want to come out and support some local music and what we're trying to do here at the podcast. I'd really appreciate it. Otherwise, I will see you guys later, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.